I'll never forget the moment my phone buzzed on my mahogany desk in the dead hours of a rain-soaked night, a moment that shattered the delicate balance of my meticulously ordered life. It wasn't a routine business alert or a client update. Instead, the screen displayed an image that froze my heart. There, in the middle of a carefree laugh, was my wife, Caroline, captured in an unguarded moment of abandon. Equally shocking was the sight of our son, Brandon, standing too close, his arm casually draped over her shoulder. His eyes, dark and defiant, seemed to silently challenge me, daring me to face the betrayal documented in that single, damning photograph. For over 20 years, Caroline and I have built our lives on routine and precision. Our grand home was a testament to our shared success, a place where every detail, from the gleam of the polished hardwood floors to the soft murmur of conversation over dinner, spoke of calm predictability. Caroline moved with a grace that transformed each corridor into a stage of quiet elegance, while I dedicated myself to contracts, mergers, and the relentless pursuit of professional triumph. I prided myself on maintaining control, convinced that discipline and order could manage every aspect of our existence. Then came the day Brandon returned. He had been away for 3 long years, pursuing a degree I had funded with every expectation of his gratitude and eventual maturity. He rolled into the driveway in a battered sedan, his disheveled appearance and restless eyes belying the promise of youth. His arrival stirred up old resentments, the echoes of the pain caused by his mother's untimely death, which had long cast a shadow over our family. At first, I dismissed his bitterness as the natural response of a young man scarred by loss. But soon, subtle signs began to accumulate. A lingering glance exchanged between him and Caroline, a smile that spoke of a secret understanding, and a quiet intimacy that grew in the spaces where our family once stood united. That rain-drenched night, as I retreated to my study with a sense of foreboding, the image on my phone replayed incessantly in my mind. It compelled me to search for more evidence of this inexplicable betrayal. Over the years, I had installed security cameras throughout our home, a precaution I had once thought unnecessary in our secure, predictable world. With trembling fingers, I began reviewing the footage from that fateful night. In the dim glow of the monitor, I saw Caroline, clad in a soft silk robe, casually pouring herself a glass of wine. On the worn leather sofa beside her, Brandon lounged with a relaxed confidence, his hand resting on her in a way that was all too intimate. Every stolen glance and forbidden gesture was captured, a silent record that slowly unraveled the trust one had so carefully constructed. In the days that followed, our home transformed. Mornings that once promised a comforting routine now carried a palpable tension. Caroline's graceful movements became hesitant, familiar. Inviting eyes now flickered with guilt and an unspoken sorrow. At breakfast, I deliberately left my phone face up on the table, watching closely as her fingers trembled while reaching for her coffee cup. Brandon, always the quiet observer, avoided my gaze, his expression unreadable and dark. In these small, telling moments, I began to piece together a painful truth. The sanctuary I had built was no longer secure. Every accidental touch and every half-spoken word exchanged between Caroline and Brandon resonated in my ears like a tolling bell announcing an inevitable reckoning. I started recording these moments in my mind and later, by carefully reviewing the security footage, compiled an irrefutable dossier of evidence. I had thought myself too busy, too engrossed in the pursuit of success, to notice the cracks in our family facade. Yet, beneath the surface of our orderly life, betrayal had taken root. That night, as the rain subsided to a constant murmur and the rest of the world slept unaware, I sat alone in my study. The only light emanated from the flickering screen of my computer, where Caroline and Brandon's images played in a loop, a tableau of intimacy and deception that cut deeper than any spoken word. I replayed the sequences repeatedly, each iteration intensifying the weight of every secret and every suppressed emotion. It was as if the camera had captured not just their physical proximity, but the very essence of their betrayal, a betrayal that would irrevocably alter the course of our lives. In the solitude of that darkened room, I found myself reflecting on the early days of our marriage, a time when love had been effortless and every shared smile or gentle touch had promised a future built on mutual trust. Over the years, however, the ceaseless routine of daily life and my relentless focus on business had gradually eroded the spontaneous passion that once defined our relationship. In that slow, creeping decay, the seeds of betrayal had found fertile ground. I wondered how I had failed to see the signs. Had I been so blinded by my own obsession with control and success that I missed the subtle shifts in our home? The lingering glances, the hushed words exchanged in the dark of night after I had retired, the warmth of touches that should have belonged solely to me, all were clues I had chosen to ignore. Now, the evidence was irrefutable. The home I had built as a fortress of order had become a stage for the unraveling of everything I held dear. I made a silent vow that night. I would no longer allow betrayal to fester in the shadows. I would gather every piece of evidence and every moment of deceit, using them to reclaim the control that was slipping away. My heart was heavy with sorrow and anger, yet beneath that, a cold determination began to crystallize. I had constructed my life on the certainty of control and order, and now I would do whatever it took to restore that order, even if it meant confronting the painful truths about the ones I loved most. In the days that followed this damning revelation, our home became a silent battleground of unspoken tension and fractured trust. Mornings that once promised routine now carried an undercurrent of dread. As I rose early to prepare for another day of relentless meetings and business calls, every creak in the hallway and every whispered murmur from behind closed doors reminded me that the life I had painstakingly built was disintegrating before my eyes. Caroline's transformation was subtle yet unmistakable. The woman who had once exuded grace now moved through our home with a hesitancy that betrayed inner turmoil. I watched her during breakfast, seated at our long oak table with an air of resignation. Her fingers trembled as she lifted her coffee cup, and when our eyes met, she quickly looked away. The radiant warmth that once lit her face was replaced by a pallid, haunted expression, one that seemed burdened by a secret too heavy to bear. Brandon, too, was changing. The young man who had returned with a brooding anger now wore his defiance like armor. At first, I had hoped his return might signal the possibility of reconciliation, a chance to bridge the growing distance between us. Instead, his silence became a statement. During family meals, he avoided eye contact and his responses to my questions were curt and clipped. I began to note every furtive glance exchanged between him and Caroline, a shared smile here, a subtle touch there, that spoke of complicity and a betrayal that had been allowed to fester. As weeks passed, the tension in our home grew ever more palpable. I spent countless evenings alone in my study, not out of loneliness but driven by an obsessive need to document every detail of this slow disintegration. The upgraded security cameras streamed live footage into my computer, and I scrutinized every frame, every subtle shift in expression. In one sequence, I caught Caroline pausing by the kitchen window, her eyes lingering on the rain-soaked garden as though searching for solace. In another, Brandon leaned close, his hand briefly grazing hers, a gesture that lasted long enough to set my pulse racing. Each small, seemingly insignificant moment became a piece of an undeniable puzzle. Late one night, as the rain turned to a steady drizzle, I found myself rewatching a particular clip, a sequence in which Caroline, in a rare moment of vulnerability, lowered her gaze and her expression softened into something resembling regret. It was the only instance hinting at remorse, and it stung all the more because it confirmed the complexity of her betrayal. Had our once vibrant love diminished into mere habit? And was Brandon's defiance a cry for help or simply a reflection of his own inner decay? These questions haunted me even as a steely resolve to reclaim the control I so desperately craved began to form. The slow unraveling of our family was marked by minor conflicts and nearly silent confrontations. One afternoon, as I passed by the living room, I overheard a low conversation. Caroline's soft, almost pleading tone mingled with Brandon's terse, dismissive replies. Their words were fragmented, yet the tension was unmistakable. Hidden in the shadows, I listened as they spoke in hushed tones about the past and what must be done. Their conversation ended abruptly, leaving behind only an echo of despair and the sense that change was inevitable. In long, sleepless nights, the images from the camera replayed relentlessly in my mind, a vivid montage of every secret moment. I questioned whether I had been complicit in the slow decay of our marriage. Had my relentless pursuit of control blinded me to the fragility of our love? The certainty I once clung to, that I was the master of my domain, now felt like a cruel illusion. In seeking perfection, I had inadvertently left the door open for betrayal to creep in. Despite the mounting evidence, I struggled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. I found myself pacing the polished floors of our home late into the night, the echo of my footsteps underscoring the silence that was as deafening as any scream. Every shadow seemed to whisper the truth I could no longer deny. I cataloged every instance of intimacy between Caroline and Brandon, each timestamp, each expression that revealed far more than words ever could. Every detail was a reminder of the life disintegrating around me, a life where trust had been shattered and only fragments of what once was remained. There were days when I attempted to speak with Caroline, my tone calm and measured, yet every conversation ended in heavy silence. I tried asking about small discrepancies, a misplaced cup here, a delayed reply there, but her evasive responses only deepened the chasm between us. The confrontation that I knew was inevitable hovered in the air, terrifying in its certainty. I realized that if I were to restore order, I would eventually have to force the truth into the open, regardless of the pain it would inflict. In the midst of this emotional storm, I also found an unsettling clarity. The betrayal had stripped away the veneer of perfection that had long masked the vulnerabilities in our relationship. Now, with every secret recorded and every lie exposed, I faced the raw reality of our situation. The facade of a well-ordered life had given way to a turbulent storm of emotions and unanswered questions. I was forced to confront not only the actions of those I loved, but also my own failings. It wasn't long before the mounting tension reached its breaking point. On a stormy evening heavy with the promise of change, everything came to a head. I had made a calculated decision to mention future plans, a casual remark about a weekend retreat to our lake house, as if it were a normal business trip. I watched their reactions carefully. Caroline's eyes, once so serene, darkened with a mixture of apprehension, and Brandon's jaw clenched, and for the first time in many days, I saw anger flicker across his face, a raw, unfiltered emotion that told me he no longer wished to remain silent. That evening, after dinner had passed in oppressive silence, I gathered them in the living room. The room, a haven of order and routine, now felt charged with palpable hostility. The soft light of the table lamp cast long shadows on the walls, emphasizing every line of tension on our faces. I took a deep breath and began, "Caroline, Brandon, we need to talk." Caroline's eyes briefly darted away before meeting mine again, laden with sorrow and resignation. Brandon shifted in his seat, his gaze fixed on something beyond the room, as if searching for an escape. I continued slowly. "For too long, I believed our home was built on truth and commitment. But lately, I have observed actions and heard whispers that suggest otherwise." My words hung heavy in the air. I paused deliberately, then added, "I have seen things and recorded them. Every moment of intimacy, every silent exchange between you two, it is clear that trust has been broken." A shudder passed through the row. Caroline's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the sofa, and Brandon's eyes, dark with anger, finally met mine. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, his voice brittle with defiance yet laced with uncertainty. Caroline's voice emerged as a barely audible whisper. "It isn't as simple as you say." Her words faltered, laden with regret, and I pressed on. "Do not pretend I am blind. I have seen every furtive glance and every touch that should have been mine alone. I trusted both of you to preserve the family we built." My voice was cold and unyielding. Brandon's expression contorted with anger as he retorted, "So now you're the judge? You think you can decide what's true? You think you're entitled to control every moment of our lives?" His words carried years of pent-up resentment. Caroline's eyes filled with tears as she tried to speak. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened." Her protest was soft, desperate, a plea for understanding that fell on ears hardened by betrayal. The tension escalated. I recalled every recorded moment, the secretive gestures, the quiet intimacy, and the evidence now stood as a stark indictment against both of them. "It happened," I said slowly, "and I have all the proof I need. This isn't a momentary lapse. It's a pattern, a deliberate erosion of the trust that once held us together." The confrontation grew heated. Brandon slammed his fist on the coffee table. "You have no right," he shouted, his voice shaking with both anger and hurt. "You built your fortress of silence around yourself, never asking why you were never home, why you never really listened, and now you accuse us without understanding our pain." I met his glare steadily. "I did listen, but sometimes silence hides more than words. I have seen everything, and I can no longer allow this charade to continue." Every word was deliberate, stripping away the pretense that had long shielded our deception. In that charged moment, emotions threatened to boil over. Caroline, tears streaming down her face, reached out a trembling hand as if to bridge the widening gap between us. "Please," she pleaded, "let's talk this out without more pain." But the tension was too raw. Every emotion was on edge, and the promise of reconciliation dissolved into the storm raging inside our hearts. Then, in a desperate move born of both fear and defiance, Brandon abruptly stood up. His eyes flashed dangerously as I caught a glint of metal, a small handgun he had hidden away, a final symbol of his rebellion. The room fell silent for an instant as the gravity of our confrontation set in. I froze, heart pounding, realizing we had crossed a point of no return. "Brandon, put that down," I said calmly, my voice firm yet intended to defuse rather than incite further violence. But the charged air left little room for calm. His hand trembled as he raised the weapon, an act of defiance and a silent cry for help. "I'm tired of pretending," he growled, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm tired of being forgotten, of watching you control every aspect of our lives." His words cut through the tension like a knife. At that critical moment, the silence shattered with the sound of a gunshot, a sudden, deafening report that echoed through the row. Time seemed to slow as I felt a sharp, burning pain in my shoulder. Brandon's eyes widened in shock, and Caroline's anguished cry filled the space. Chaos erupted in a blur of frantic movement and desperate shouts. I lunged forward, instinctively trying to wrest control away from the man I once called my son. In the ensuing struggle, the weapon clattered across the floor. For what felt like an eternity, we stood there, Brandon, his face contorted by anger and regret, and I, overwhelmed by pain and betrayal. The room was thick with fury, sorrow, and a profound sense of loss. Caroline sank to her knees, her face etched with despair, while I struggled to steady my breathing, my shoulder throbbing with each heartbeat. In that heavy silence, it was clear nothing would ever restore what had been lost. Our confrontation had not only exposed the truth, but had irrevocably altered the fabric of our lives. As I looked into Brandon's eyes, I saw not just the defiant anger of a rebellious son, but the deep sorrow of a young man burdened by his own demons. And in Caroline's tear-streaked face, I saw the anguish of a woman caught in a crossfire of love and betrayal. In the aftermath, our family was defined by a brutal new reality, one where secrets no longer hid in the shadows and every act of betrayal demanded a price. I vowed to reclaim control of my life, even if it meant shattering every remaining illusion of love and trust. As the storm outside abated, leaving only a haunting echo of rain, our living room remained steeped in silence, a silence that spoke of a shattered past and an uncertain future. The violent confrontation had been raw and unyielding. While the immediate chaos subsided, I knew the scars would endure, marking us forever. In the long, harrowing hours that followed, our home settled into a painful limbo. The echo of that explosive moment mingled with the steady drip of water from the eaves, a constant reminder of our broken bonds. I sat alone in the living room, my injured shoulder burning with each movement, while the shattered fragments of our lives lay scattered like broken glass. Brandon, still in shock, slumped against a cold wall, his eyes vacant before the storm of anger and regret returned. Caroline, trembling and tear-streaked, collapsed to the floor as if crushed by the weight of our shared truth. Our vulnerabilities, betrayals, and unspoken sorrows lay bare for all to see, dissolving the certainty of our former life into a painful reality. In the days that followed, I spent hours reviewing the footage from that night, the stolen glances, the desperate pleas, the defiant snarl of a son who had once been full of promise. Every frame became an indelible mark, a scar on the fabric of our family. This recorded evidence, once merely a silent witness to our lives, now served as the cornerstone of a new order I was determined to impose. I oscillated between deep sorrow and cold, unyielding resolve. I took stock of the ruins of our shattered relationships and realized that reclaiming control meant more than punishing betrayal. It meant rebuilding a life based on brutal honesty. Illusions had to be discarded. The family I once cherished was now irreparably fractured. Yet, in that painful clarity, I discovered an inner strength I had long forgotten. One morning, as pale light seeped through the curtains and the world outside stirred with tentative hope, I confronted Caroline in our kitchen. She sat at the table, red-eyed from crying, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. The silence between us was thick with what had transpired. I spoke slowly. Caroline, I have seen everything. I have recorded every moment of betrayal. We cannot ignore our past any longer. Her haunted eyes searched mine for forgiveness, but I offered none. Our lives have been altered irreversibly. I cannot unsee what has been done, and neither can you. For Brandon, the pain was even more complex. He withdrew further, spending long hours isolated in his room, his once defiant expression now clouded with despair. One afternoon, I found him on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at the wall. Sitting beside him in silence, he finally spoke in a low, broken voice. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." His apology, fragile and unconvincing, deepened the chasm between us. I realized then that the pain of betrayal was a burden each of us would bear alone, and that forgiveness, if it ever came, a long, uncertain journey. Determined to regain some measure of control, I began to formalize a new approach. Over the following weeks, I met with trusted legal advisors and counselors, determined to secure both the tangible and intangible remnants of my work. The evidence I had collected became the basis of a personal reckoning, a trial that would redefine our future. I was not interested in immediate retribution. I sought instead to establish a framework where truth was paramount and no act of betrayal would go unpunished. As I methodically rebuilt the structure of my life, I also redrew the boundaries of our fractured family. New legal agreements were drafted concerning our assets, responsibilities, and the roles each of us would play in the uncertain future. This process was as much about reclaiming control as it was about establishing a pathway to healing, a pathway that, though it could never restore what was lost, might allow us to move forward with some dignity. Many nights I found myself alone in my study, the soft glow of my computer screen illuminating a room filled with silence and shadows. In those quiet moments, I reflected on the cost of my pursuit of perfection. My relentless drive to maintain an unblemished image had blinded me to the vulnerabilities festering in our hull. It was a lesson learned at a high price, a price that would echo in my mind for years to come. As autumn arrived with its chill winds and fading light, a tentative order emerged from the chaos. Caroline and I rarely spoke of the past in explicit terms, yet there was an unspoken understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of the irreversible rupture. Brandon remained estranged, a living reminder of the consequences of our collective failure. And I, with my shoulders still aching from that violent night, carried the weight of my decisions with grim determination. This new order was not a return to the past, but a reluctant step into an uncertain future. I had reclaimed control over my life, but the cost was etched in every scar, every broken memory, and every silent glance exchanged in our now fractured hull. The legacy of our shattered family became a part of me, a dark chapter in a story that continued to unfold, one in which every secret, every betrayal, and every act of retribution shaped the uncertain contours of our future. As I continued to navigate the aftermath of that life-altering night, I do so with the bitter certainty that nothing will ever be the same. The evidence of our downfall, recorded in every frame and every silent moment, will forever remind me that in a world built on fragile trust, the price of betrayal is steep, and the path to redemption is paved with sorrow and irrevocable change.